Hey guys, it's Tyler. I wanted to talk about lore dumping because that was a thing that got brought up on Max Nye's stream last week, and it wasn't really pertaining to the subject of that stream, so I kind of moved on. But it got me thinking. I meant to make this video yesterday, but I was still sort of refining my thoughts and totally forgot what day of the week it was. This week has been flying by for me. So yeah, lore dumping. It's generally considered one of the evils in tabletop RPGs, even if you're not, in pretty much no matter what sphere you're in. But there are circumstances where I think you almost have to do it depending on the type of game you're going to run, right? Let's say you're starting a game where the characters know nothing about the world. Look at the session I just recently played with Rick and Abraham in the Infinity's Edge system. Abraham had to do some lore dumping to us because, as characters and as players both, we knew nothing about the setting explicitly. We're not supposed to know anything about the setting yet. You can drip feed the lore of the world and the information of the world via other encounters. You maybe just happen to see, the first time you walk into a large city, you see tons of crime everywhere. You see, a gang, shaking somebody down for money, or maybe they shake you down for money, for protection. As soon as you walk into the city, that tells you something about the world. All of the buildings are dilapidated and broken. There's open arms selling that tells you, about the law or maybe the lawlessness in the world. Maybe you find out slowly via these little drip feedings of lore that, oh, we're playing in a post-apocalypse. That's sort of fun to play characters that don't know that they're in a post-apocalypse for whatever reason. I think that was a real missed opportunity on Fallout 4's part because that's an interesting character line to go by. But what if in real life we get lore dumps? I mean, it's called it's called school generally. And I think that's part of why people don't like lore dumps is because they remind them of school, and most people don't like school. Uh, but also, if you've ever watched a video of for educational purposes, that's effectively a lore dump. So, what if your character in the game is going to gain a great deal of knowledge? They're going to read a book on, okay, we're going to have to fight some horrific entity, some demon, and we only know it by name. I would want some more preparation for that, so I'm going to go to the library, look up everything via this name, and now you can play with some, as a GM, forbidden knowledge things and some pitfalls that wizard might fall into. That way, they don't just immediately go to the library, flip to a book, and go, okay, now I read you all of this information. But nonetheless, they're going to get that information, right? To some greater or lesser extent. Maybe they don't find the book at the library here, but they should eventually find some knowledge on this. And yeah, you giving them that knowledge, there's two ways you could go about it, I suppose, which is either, but it should always be done through the world. You should never just be randomly reading off giant chunks of exposition from the book for no reason. I think a lot of people do their lore dumping that way, where they just start reading like walls of text from an adventure module or something that's just random information about the setting that is not relevant at all to the current point. And that's bad. That's not good lore dumping. That's not how you should do it. That sort of thing you should do before the game ever starts, if your players are interested in learning about the lore. And then I would say you don't need to read it verbatim. You can have a more, conversational little shorthand. Hey, here's some big point. Here's the biggest city in the world. Your characters would probably know about that. Your characters probably know about the major imports and exports of the city that they're living in or that they have lived in their whole lives, and they would probably know this, and then move on. Just some short bullet points, and then if they have, higher intelligence, higher knowledge, skill, whatever your game uses to represent a character's base of knowledge, give them more bullet points. Or just give them free reign to, look through some of the source material, if you're okay with that as a GM. I am, usually. So, yeah, the NPCs may end up telling your player characters about something. Hey, we have this problem that we need you to fix. Why is this a problem? Well, 100 years ago, we locked away this lich, and we thought that would be a permanent solution, but it turns out it's not. His bonds are weakening. A lore dump can be as short as that, right? And maybe lore dump implies that it's longer than that. Well, maybe your players have been harassed by these otherworldly creatures the entire game, sessions perhaps, and they still don't know anything about them. They've yet to figure out it's an unknown thing in the world, and they have spent sessions trying to get to somebody who understands what's going on. That sort of thing happens. Look at like horror movies, Hellraiser, people they're trying to figure out what the hell this box thing is for. Who's at the cusp of all of this? And then usually the climax of a lot of these movies is them figuring out, oh, okay, this is what this thing does, this is where it's from. You get the exposition that cuts the pace down a little bit. The pace is slowed down. You get, okay, some reveal, and sometimes the revelation of what's going on is more horrific than than not knowing, if it's done really well. But sometimes, a lot of the times it puts the characters at rest. So sometimes the lore dump is actively what the players are working towards. Don't just lore dump for no reason, but if your players have been actively trying to find information out about the game through an NPC, through a book, whatever, you should have that NPC give them the... Right, if your player characters ask to some old wizened dwarf, so what's the deal with this giant artifact that we found in this cave? Are you just not going to answer? Are you going to answer, oh, it does stuff? They're expecting a deeper explanation. They wouldn't ask. And the most important part, if you have role players, if you're starting to drag on and maybe, because, characters in real life, so characters in your games who should represent a real life, if not our own, one-to-one, you should have wordy and verbose characters. They exist. It shouldn't be all of them, but, experts especially, we tend to drag on stuff. You keep going. Your players should feel free to go, hey, man, cut to the chase. That's all interesting and fine. Or, just depending on how they are, look, man, we don't have time for this. Tell us give us what we need to know. Explain like I'm 5. They can interrupt. Your players should know by the session 0 they can interrupt the GM at any point. I think that's a universal rule of role-playing that everyone should apply. The GM should never be just sitting there rattling stuff off and go, no, shh, he's not done. My character isn't finished explaining things to you. No. Just let it happen. That's pretty much all I had to say. Yeah, lore dumps can be... they can be things that the players are actively looking for, so don't just not do them because holistically lore dumps are bad. Do them when your players are... That's the reward for the players having done something. They gain this this information. Information can be like one of the 3 things adventurers are looking for on quests generally. Money, power, information. So, don't be afraid to give them that information, and players don't be afraid to, if your GM is droning on and you've already heard what you need to hear, move on. So yeah, lore dumps I don't think are horrific, but I think they can be done horrifically. So let me know your thoughts on that. Do you consider lore dumps something totally different? It's one of those words we kind of use. It's a colloquialism, so it doesn't have a fixed definition. Let me hear your thoughts, as always. See ya.